operative political body politic operations operating at North America, you will be familiar with what is known as the Organic Act of Congress of 1871, and most scholars and peoples who teach civics are well aware of that official operations of de facto political platforms. Now, operatively, in order to write themselves into the history of the Asiatics here at the North Gate, many among the hybrid Europeans, coming from most of what they would call the Dross class, coming from the Iberian Peninsula that you know as Europe today, etc. And thereafter, particularly after the 1800s, but much of the battles that have taken place on the land since the 1700s, etc., has been in the what you would call stage by stage eventual overthrow of the Moorish Empire at the Maghreb or the Western Hemisphere, generally referred to in history books as the colonization of North America. That's the cover for the colonization and the conquest of the Maghreb, or what is known as the Red House, also referred to as Casablanca, also referred to as Humpty Dumpty. But we're going to go into some of their operative psychology, and it integrated within their operations. It must be comprehended and must be overstood and understood by the people that the hybrid Europeans who have been operating for the last couple hundred years at North America in a de facto pseudo sovereign authoritative position, much of their authority or jurisdictional powers comes from conquest, therefore de facto, unconstitutional, therefore de facto, in breach of treaties, therefore de facto. However, to the degree that they have been making decisions politically, socially, and economically that has not only affected we Moors of the North Gate, but also other nations and tribes on the planet due to their hegemony operations, also using in the nature of their operations dark magic, human trafficking, pedophilia, flesh eating, etc. Negative vibrations used through all scientific methods and tools, etc. However, it's important for people who are less than aware of what's actually at the root of the politics operating at North America to be aware of one of their main tools that have been used by the hybrid Europeans who have conquered the Moors of the North Gate, but also it's being presented for the people to be aware that the energies and the psychosis that have come from these operations is also dying. So when you see, or as you see the people around the planet awakening or reawakening to a cognizance that's related to the ancient Hykupto, ancient Egypt, ancient Africa, Asia, and those principles, it has more to do with people becoming aware of the negative dark tools that have been used to suppress them. And to that degree, and on that note, we're sharing some of the Christian Black Codes of 1724, and many of you who are already aware of it or of those codes are aware of some of the entries and the psychoses that are placed within it, and also the psychic attacks, the points are made for mind control, for breaking up families, etc. And we're going to hit on all of them. In the Christian Black Codes of 1724, there's 54 articles, basically. But we're going to go through a few of them so you can look at some of the social engineering that you see going on every day and understand and comprehend much of their motivations, much of the de facto legislation that takes place in and among those who are part of the demo operations of the Kaiklos and Ku Klux Klan operations, which you know today as the Cotton Wigs and the Conscience Wigs, who are veiled in what is known as the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, operating on the land in a de facto structure at North America. In the fact of the matter, from a true political perspective, that is their own private human trafficking political platforms, which have no what you call honor relationship to us, the people of the land. However, because it affects us, and because the fundamentals of the Constitution for the United States is derived from our fatwa, or the fatwa principles of the Honor Honesty Confederation of Moors to the north, etc., which you will be told in history is Iqua. It concerns us also because within the confines or the construct of the Constitution for the United States is their obligations to all treaties, etc., which comprises the actual supreme law of the land, all of which has been breached and is consistently being breached. However, we are going through the Constantinian code systems just to make you aware of some of their psychology. So we're going to read some of them and make some comments in between to how we might say reawaking some of those who are still sleeping, so that we can be better prepared to start looking in the areas among our people with proper civics and self-determination, which would be right of sovereign self-government, etc., which is necessary for our people to re-qualify themselves for self-government. And so you must know some of the acts of your enemies in order to not be distracted by false paradigms and what they may call false flags that are put in place to distract you, whether they're social, political, or economic. So awareness of motivations of the chess game of life that's being played at North America, it is good to have a comprehension of some of the tools that are being used by the de facto politicians. Was there something you want to ask me, Doctor?
Yeah, there's a question, and I don't want to miss it, just I'll get there earlier, from Divine Sovereign. How do we hold them accountable for breaching the treaty?
By holding yourself accountable to it. I know that sounds to some people like a diverted answer, but in fact, that's what it is. And it's back to understanding that they are de facto. That's number one. And that they're, as it would say in the Septuagint or the Bible, there's no truth in them. Those who have taken over the honorable treaties and Constitution for the United States are actually operating in adverse position to the Republic principle that is at the root of that Constitution and treaty. So that must be understood. Now we must also look at the fact that our people, the Aboriginals at North America, for the most part, who have been socially engineered under the Christian Black codes, have not been harmonic with the law of the land themselves, as opposed to an assumption that just the hybrids have been in breach of constitutional principles. Keep in mind, the Constitution principles are more ancient than that document. That must be understood. And those principles come from Muslim law that actually come from Saba law or the Sabian Moors, etc., what you would call the ancient Coptic or Kupta Coptic Christians, etc. So you need to understand many truths that are about the culture of the people here that has not been taught generally, so that you don't get caught in the schisms that are also put in place to divide us among each other. So a lot of people will look at the fact of many of the Moors at the Maghreb being Muslim and not be aware of the fact that Muslims or Islam is actually a sect of the Coptic Sabian or Sabian Moors, what you might call, with a cover up. This is a cover up, the word Jew, which is a fiction cover up to cover up Saba, which is really covering up the Sabian Moors, which is the foundation of religion on the planet, period. That's the truth. And so because people haven't been taught the truth about the history of religion, people think that when you use the different sectoral terms like Muslim, Christian, and Jew, that you're talking about totally, from a narrative point of view, totally different philosophies, when actually they all have the same root. But by people not knowing the real history, they're caught into the schism and take the position that they must take one side or the other in order to prove themselves worthy, when that is a false narrative that also must be corrected. And the other thing that must be corrected, when we're reading the Christian Black Codes of 1724, you must also be aware of the fact that many of the hybrid Europeans who have conquered the Western Hemisphere and have been on a tear to conquer the rest of the Asiatic world, particularly for the last couple hundred years, that they, for the most part, are not Christians at all. They use it as a front. Most of them are, in fact, Niceno-Constantinian operatives who have been using Christianity as a front for their operations. So that must be comprehended by the people, because a lot of people don't know that. And so when you're loosely using these terms, Christian, Muslim, and Jew, without knowing the background or the origins, we have a tendency to fall into the divisions and schisms that are part of the mind control and the psychic attacks that are used to control the people. Now, the closer and the more aware that our people become to the realities of what got us to where we are today, the closer and the more capable you, I, and we as a people will be in our capacity to enforce the law, the supreme law of the land, and of course enforce the treaties, and of course by virtue of that, causing the hybrid occupiers to take a different position, and that's what's going to force them actually to maintain honor or go back to honor for their own political survival. But much of that will be done, and is being done actually right now, from more of an ethereal plane now, as most of those or efforts that have been put forth to bring justice at the North Gate have failed in the third dimensional level, and therefore higher dimensional or planes of life energies are brought to bear, which are operative now. And this is, again, as we're talking about the Christian Black Codes of 1724, it is to let you know that that paradigm is dying. The force and powers that they have had availed to them under the Piscean energy to exercise that successfully, the energy platform that even would allow it to live is dying. And so this is also why we're presenting some of this, is so that you would be willing and more willing yourselves and this is us. When I'm talking to you, I'm talking to me too, to let it go, or what some people would say in a metaphorical position, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. You got to remember that the hybrid Europeans who have been operating de facto and breaching all divine law principles on the land and among the people, they have had their jurisdictional powers because we keep giving it to them, or we keep agreeing with them, or we keep trying to participate in dead structures, which you would know as corporate structures, with them, and to be a part of it. And in fact, by virtue of us doing that, we're actually projecting our energies to them, and it is certainly accepted by them, not unlike an innate or an inanimate animate machinery operating from the position of a receptor and a battery. When you stop feeding the beast cannot live. One of the problems that we have, again, is that the people seem to have this idea that the hybrid Europeans have power just because they have guns, or they have power just because they have used technology that they have stolen from ancient Egypt, ancient Egypta, ancient Yucatan, and hid it from the world, and have been back in engineering for a couple of hundred years, and by virtue of that, have put themselves artificially a few hundred years ahead of the rest of the world, and are in fact using that technology, which is really ancient technology, it's not new. So let's get that out of the way immediately. To enslave, and that's connotative, the world, or to make serfs out of the rest of the world, and with their black codes operations and plans to genocide the Aboriginal people before they wake up to the frauds and turn on them. And so from a political perspective, you can not justify, but comprehend a lot of their political motivations for promoting schisms. However, it must also be noted, as you must be aware, with the rest of the Asiatic world, as we've been telling the people for the last 10 to 12 years, that the rest of the civilized world were going to stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds. And as many of you have recalled, 10 to 15 years ago, and more recently, in the 7 or 8 year area of the timeline, by the calendar year, we've been telling people to start disconnecting themselves from the hybrid European corporations, because the nations of the world would stop buying their treasury bonds, which are rooted in the base of their economic operations, particularly since 1862, which is why you will see many of the records of the congressional records, for those of you who do research, will have a lot of blanks in them, because they don't want you to be aware of the fact that that part of those agreements that were made among themselves, particularly the Treaty of Peace and not the Treaty of Peace, the Secret Treaty of Verona operations, as well as the Kyclos operations at North America, in conjunction with the Circle Church and the Chancery operating at Fleet Street in District of London. We're talking the City of London, not London itself, but what we call a corporate platform for the bishopric or the dark priesthood, who have called themselves gods of the world. That roughly 1861, late 1861, 1862 is when they started imposing the tithe upon the Aboriginal people to pay off artificial debts that were artificially created, which are to this day referred to falsely as national debt. And so with all that they steal from the people in tithing, and they change the word tithing, tribute to Rome, as tax. And 20%, roughly around 20% of that goes to the British accredited registry operators of members of the Roman Curia, who construct most of the fixed writs that you'll find today with the IRS as an example, with different organizations like the CIA, FBI, etc., and the funding the war machines that they go to and fro to earth-devouring nations. The taxes is drawn from the people of the land, as well as some of your naturalized, not nationalized, some of your pseudo-naturalized hybrid Europeans who have come to the North America and who are corporate citizens of the United States, or what they say U.S. citizen, which is a corporate construct and not a nationality. For those, they're also taxed, although their tax burdens are limited, and 20% of that goes to the barristers, etc., which is again why they don't teach the people about the original Constitution for the United States and the treaties, which are conjoined as one unit, etc. So when you're talking constitutional law, constitutional enforcement, you're talking treaty enforcement at the same time. This is again why civics has not taught to conquered peoples, so that you're not aware of the obligations and the burdens of obligations and the obligations to all treaties that exist with those persons that our people have assumed, and that's a quote unquote assumed to be government when actually they're organized criminals. But again, by our people not being aware of the true